So what happens when a car manufacturer decides to, completely reinvent the internal combustion engine? Like they spend 20 years developing this no-compromise mechanical marvel and just put it into hundreds of thousands of family SUVs.
Well, according to the massive class action lawsuit we are looking at today,
Yeah.
you get cars that suddenly decelerate from like 60 to 20 miles per hour right on the highway.
Right, or they throw metal shavings into their own oil or require, three complete engine replacements before they even hit 70,000 miles.
Yeah, it's pretty extreme.
So, welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at a story where engineering ambition just violently collides with your daily commute. Our mission today is to unpack the reality behind Nissan and Infiniti's highly touted variable compression or VC turbo
Yeah,
engines.
and these engines are basically the heart of the 2019 through 2023 Nissan Altimas and Rogues, as well as the Infiniti QX50.
Exactly.
And to really grasp the scale of what we are talking about, we are pulling from a really massive stack of sources today.
Oh, yeah, we've got the core class action lawsuit against Nissan North America and Nissan Motor Co. That's Becker et al. V. Nissan.
Right. Plus, we are looking at the manufacturer's original technical diagrams, their glossy marketing brochures, and honestly, a mountain of terrifying real-world complaints filed by drivers with the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration.
I mean, looking at the marketing brochures for these cars, they literally use the phrase refuse to compromise.
Which is a bold claim.
Very bold. They sold this technology as the biggest revolution in the internal combustion engine since its inception. They promised, like, the holy grail, the high-end, aggressive power of a turbocharged sports car, and the wallet-friendly fuel efficiency of a compact economy car.
All happening simultaneously under the same hood.
Right. But to understand why these engines are now allegedly self-destructing, we first kind of have to understand the technology they were trying to disrupt in the first place.
Yeah, because for over a century, car engines have basically operated on a very rigid, fixed principle.
And that principle is the fixed compression ratio. So if you picture the inside of a traditional four-stroke engine, you have a cylinder, right?
Right.
And inside that cylinder is a piston that goes up and down. The piston is attached to a solid, unbending piece of steel called a connecting rod.
And that rod connects directly to the crankshaft at the bottom,
Yeah.
which is, what ultimately spins to turn the wheels.
Exactly. So the compression ratio is really just how tightly the engine squishes the air and fuel together before igniting it.
Right. It's the difference in empty space inside the cylinder when the piston is pulled all the way down versus when it is pushed all the way up to the top.
And because that connecting rod in a traditional engine is just a solid piece of metal, it can only ever push the piston up to one specific height. It never changes.
Which means automakers historically had to make a choice.
Right.
Like if you build an engine with a low compression ratio, say 8-to-1, you don't squish the air and fuel too tightly. That leaves room for a turbocharger to force a massive amount of extra air into the cylinder for a huge burst of power when you hit the gas.
But the downside there is that setup is inherently inefficient. It burns way more fuel when you are just cruising on the highway.
Exactly. And on the flip side, if you build an engine with a high compression ratio like 14-to-1, the piston pushes incredibly high up into the cylinder.
So it extracts the absolute maximum energy from like a tiny drop of fuel.
Yeah, you get phenomenal gas mileage, but you cannot use a turbocharger to add power.
Right, because if you force extra air into a space that is already squeezed that tightly, the pressure becomes way too great and the engine knocks.
Exactly. So you always had to choose power or efficiency.
Well, until Nissan spent 2 decades and billions of dollars developing this VC turbo, which basically throws that rigid, fixed rod simplicity completely out the window.
Yeah, they designed a system that can physically change how high the piston reaches into the cylinder while the car is actually in motion.
Okay, let's unpack this, because looking at these technical diagrams from the lawsuit, the sheer number of moving parts they added is just staggering.
It really is.
I mean, instead of a single solid piece of metal connecting the piston to the crankshaft, they replaced it with this multi-link robotic ballet.
Yeah, they use an actuator motor, an A-link, a control shaft, and then a C-link, an L-link, and a U-link.
Which is just a massive alphabet soup of parts. Let me try to visualize this for you listening. Imagine your arm. A traditional engine is like keeping your elbow completely locked straight while you punch. It travels the exact same distance every single time.
That is a really perfect way to look at it.
But the VC Turbo basically adds an elbow, a wrist, and a few extra knuckles to that connecting rod.
Right, so by using an electric actuator motor to bend that mechanical elbow slightly, the car can physically pull the piston down.
Creating a low compression ratio, like 8-to-1 for turbocharged power.
Exactly. Or it can straighten the arm out to push the piston higher for maximum fuel efficiency at 14-to-1.
And this adjustment happens continuously, right? Like in fractions of a second while you are driving.
Yeah, you step on the gas to merge, the joints flex, the compression drops to 8-to-1, the turbo spools up, and boom, you get a surge of power.
And then you ease off the gas to cruise, the joints straighten out, the compression rises to 14-to-1, and you are suddenly sipping fuel like an economy car. I mean, I get that it's an engineering marvel on a blueprint. But looking at the reality of how cars are actually used, we are talking about a mass-market family SUV, like the Nissan Rogue.
Right, a daily driver.
Yeah, it's a daily beater for grocery runs and school drop-offs. Putting a system with this many delicate linkage joints inside a contained explosion chamber just seems like engineering hubris.
It definitely adds a lot of risk.
Right. You are taking something simple and adding a dozen new ways for it to catastrophically fail.
Well, the real vulnerability comes down to friction and lubrication. A conventional engine has 2 bearing spaces per cylinder.
And those are the highly pressurized spaces where moving metal parts rotate around each other.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Separated only by a microscopic film of oil. But the VC Turbo, because of all those extra elbows and wrists in the linkage system we talked about, has 9 bearing spaces per cylinder.
Wait, 9. So the engine's oil is being spread incredibly thin across a much more complex maze of moving metal?
Yeah.
That has to require immense pressure to maintain. If the oil degrades even slightly, or if the pressure drops for like a second, those 9 joints are going to start grinding against each other.
And that is the mechanical cliff edge this engine lives on. When metal grinds on metal in a bearing space, it literally shaves microscopic flakes of steel off into the oil.
Oh, wow. So you just get metal soup.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Those metal shavings then circulate through the entire engine, acting like liquid sandpaper, just destroying everything they touch.
And the lawsuit actually points to this massive increase in bearing spaces as a primary failure point, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
So we have this engine requiring a symphony of moving joints and perfect lubrication just to fire one single piston. But what happens to that symphony when the conductor, like the engine's software lags or the mechanical joints start to stick? Because the NHTSA complaints documented in the lawsuit move us from theoretical physics to absolutely terrifying daily commutes.
Yeah, the complaints reveal a system that is fundamentally struggling to manage its own complexity and that often generates extreme friction and heat.
There is a specific anecdote from a 2019 Infiniti QX50 driver that illustrates this perfectly. So this person wakes up at 5:20 in the morning to drive to the gym.
Early morning cold engine.
Exactly. It's a 1-mile drive. They park, work out, drive the 1 mile back home, and park in the garage for 2 hours. It is literally the lightest, most routine morning commute imaginable.
Right.
But when they get back into the car to go to work and hit the start button, the engine's cooling fan immediately kicks on, and it is roaring so loudly the driver can hear it inside the cabin with all the windows rolled up.
Which is not normal at all.
No, and that fan ran continuously for 40 minutes on the drive to work.
From a diagnostic perspective, a cooling fan running at maximum speed after a 1-mile drive in the cool early morning is a massive red flag.
I mean, it has to be.
The engine isn't just warm. The vehicle's computer basically believes the engine is in danger of melting down. It points to profound internal friction.
So the multi-link system, those 9 bearing spaces, is just struggling to move smoothly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The engine is working incredibly hard just to turn itself over, generating massive amounts of heat that the cooling system is desperately trying to evacuate.
Okay, so the friction explains the heat, but the complaints also detail some really violent drivability issues. Drivers report sitting at a red light, and the car idles so roughly it feels like it is gasping for air, like it's almost stalling out completely.
Yes.
And then, without the driver even touching the pedal, the car violently lurches or jumps forward right into the intersection.
That lurching behavior often traces back to the actuator motor struggling to adjust the compression ratio at low speeds.
Oh, because it's trying to find the sweet spot for the idle.
Exactly. The engine computer is trying to find the optimal position for the linkage system to maintain a smooth idle. But if the joints are binding due to that friction we talked about, or the actuator motor itself is failing, the engine abruptly overcompensates.
So it dumps more fuel or air to keep from stalling.
Right, resulting in a sudden unintended surge of power.
That is terrifying. And then we look at what happens at highway speeds, which is where this goes from, a scary inconvenience to an actual life-threatening hazard.
Yeah, this is where it gets really bad.
Another driver documented a situation where they were traveling 60 miles per hour on the freeway and hit the gas pedal to accelerate. But instead of speeding up, the engine RPMs shot sky high, like the engine was screaming.
Wow.
Meanwhile, the car itself rapidly decelerated down to 20 miles per hour, right in the middle of highway traffic. They had to make a desperate emergency dive onto a service road just to avoid being rear-ended.
And mechanically, we know exactly why that happens. When a driver demands power at highway speeds, the engine needs to instantly drop that compression ratio down to 8:1 before the turbocharger forces all that extra air into the cylinder.
Right.
But if the linkage system gets stuck or the software miscalculates by even a fraction of a second, the compression stays stuck at 14:1.
Wait, so if the piston is pushing up tightly at 14:1 and the turbo suddenly forces a massive amount of air and fuel into that tiny space?
The mixture gets way too hot.
And it combusts too early, right? Before the spark plug even fires.
Yes. That is pre-ignition, commonly known as engine knock. The air and fuel explode while the piston is still traveling upward.
So the engine is literally physically fighting itself. An explosion is violently pushing down on the piston at the exact millisecond the crankshaft is trying to push the piston up.
Exactly. And that sends huge shock waves through all those delicate linkage joints. It creates forces that the internal components simply cannot withstand.
Which would destroy it.
Right, so when the engine's computer detects this catastrophic pre-ignition or detects that the compression ratio isn't changing as commanded, it throws the car into limp mode.
Ah, limp mode. So it cuts power to the wheels to prevent the engine from literally blowing itself apart.
Yep, which perfectly explains why the driver's RPM spiked, but the car violently decelerated to 20 miles per hour.
I mean, a car jumping forward into a crosswalk or suddenly losing all forward momentum on a freeway while surrounded by 18-wheelers. This isn't just a mechanical quirk.
No, not at all.
We are talking about a fundamental failure of the vehicle's primary purpose. A car that cannot safely merge, cannot maintain speed, and cannot hold its position predictably is no longer providing safe transport. It becomes a massive collision risk.
And that risk is compounded by the fact that these failures often happen without any warning lights until it is already too late.
So you just have no idea it's coming.
Exactly. The driver loses control of the vehicle's acceleration, which is basically one of the only tools you have to navigate out of a dangerous situation on the road.
With cars stalling out and throwing metal shavings into their own oil, you'd expect a manufacturer to issue a massive recall, right? Or a stop sale, or an immediate redesign of the engine.
You would think so.
But when we dive into the lawsuit documents, what we see instead is an endless, frustrating cycle of misdiagnoses and Band-Aid repairs at the dealership level. The plaintiffs actually allege that Nissan and Infiniti knew about this VC turbo defect as early as 2019, but actively concealed it.
And the timeline of knowledge is a really crucial part of the class action. The lawsuit claims the manufacturer possessed early warranty data, dealer repair reports, and internal testing that showed the multi-link system was highly prone to premature failure.
Yet rather than addressing the hardware, they just continued to sell the vehicles.
Yeah.
And the warranty structure is where the financial trap really snaps shut on the consumer.
Oh, absolutely.
These cars come with a 5-year or 60,000-mile powertrain warranty for Nissan and a 6-year or 70,000-mile warranty for Infiniti. Let's look at what actually happens when a driver brings one of these failing engines into the service bay while it's still under warranty.
Okay.
Take the case of plaintiff Philip Becker, who bought a new 2021 Nissan Rogue.
Right, so Becker's vehicle started displaying an engine malfunction power-reduced warning on the dashboard. He experienced the exact power loss we just discussed, coasted to a stop, and had the vehicle towed to an authorized dealership.
Okay, so he brings in a car with a revolutionary, highly complex, shape-shifting engine that is completely failing to provide power.
Yeah.
And the dealership solution,
What did they do?
they replaced the battery.
You're kidding.
Nope. They replaced the battery and they reprogrammed the engine control module. They literally gave the engine's computer a software update and sent him on his way.
I mean, by tweaking the software, the manufacturer can sometimes alter the engine's timing or reduce the turbocharger's output to mask the symptoms of the failing hardware.
Just to hide it.
Exactly. but it doesn't fix the friction or the binding linkage joints. So, predictably, a month later, Becker's exact same warning lights illuminated, the car lost power again, and he was right back to square one.
Put yourself in the shoes of Frank Oni, another plaintiff in this suit, to really understand the nightmare of trying to service a machine this complex. Oni bought a luxury 2019 Infiniti QX50. His original engine suffered a complete catastrophic failure and had to be fully replaced.
And a full engine replacement is an incredibly invasive procedure. It involves disconnecting thousands of components, wiring harnesses, and fluid lines.
So the dealership puts a brand new engine into Oni's car, and that second engine fails.
Unbelievable.
Right. So they approve a third engine replacement. He is now in his third engine in a relatively new luxury vehicle. He gets the car back, is driving down the road, and the car starts smoking heavily and simply dies.
What happened this time?
It turned out the dealership mechanics had installed the flywheel on the back of the engine incorrectly. It was either bent or put in backward. It was physically rubbing against the engine block, causing a massive oil leak.
That incident speaks volumes about the sheer complexity of the VC turbo. When you design a system so convoluted that even your own factory-trained dealer technicians struggle to properly integrate it with the rest of the vehicle, you have created a complete serviceability nightmare.
Oh, completely. We ran another complaint that perfectly captures the diagnostic chaos. A driver took their car to an Infiniti dealership experiencing that terrifying highway deceleration issue.
Limp mode thing.
Yeah. The service department couldn't replicate the problem at first. When the driver finally captured it on video to prove it was happening, the dealership decided the culprit must be the transmission.
Oh, wow.
So they completely replaced the transmission.
Honestly, it is easy to see how a technician could make that mistake. The symptoms of a failing VC turbo, the hesitation, the engine RPM shooting up without the car actually moving forward, they closely mimic the symptoms of a slipping, failing transmission.
But the driver got their car back with a brand new transmission, and 3 days later, the exact same power loss happened on the freeway.
Naturally.
They take it back to the dealer, and the dealer's response is to just do another software update. Dealerships are telling drivers that the horrifying knocking sounds their engines are making are operating per design, or they are throwing software patches at a mechanical failure.
It really forces a critical look at the corporate strategy behind these repairs. By applying software updates, replacing batteries, or conducting lengthy transmission replacements, instead of addressing the fundamental hardware flaw in the engine's multi-link system, the manufacturer is effectively just burning time.
They are running out the clock on the customer's warranty. Every time a customer is told, we couldn't replicate the issue, or is sent home with a software patch that masks the lurching for a few months, the odometer is just ticking closer to that 60,000-mile limit.
Yeah.
Once the car crosses that threshold, a $10,000 engine replacement is no longer the manufacturer's problem. It becomes the sole financial burden of the driver.
Which brings us back to the marketing brochure's promise to refuse to compromise. The manufacturer refused to compromise on the engineering blueprint, demanding both power and efficiency from a single gas engine.
Right.
But in doing so, they forced a massive compromise on the consumer, sacrificing long-term reliability and basic highway safety for just a few extra miles per gallon.
And people stretch their budgets for these cars. They save up for an Infiniti QX50 to treat themselves to a luxury experience, or they buy a Nissan Rogue because they need a reliable, safe vehicle to transport their kids.
Yeah, they buy into the promise of cutting-edge technology.
But instead, they find themselves gaslit by service departments, left stranded on the shoulder of a freeway, and eventually trapped in a financial nightmare when the engine just cannibalizes itself outside of warranty.
It's a really tough situation.
We started this deep dive looking at a brilliant concept, a mechanical marvel that spent 20 years in development. But we've traced how that ambition fractured into a reality of metal shavings, sudden highway deceleration, and endless dealership visits.
And that leaves us with a final thought to ponder as we look at the broader automotive landscape.
Okay, what are you thinking?
Well, we just explored how Nissan had to add an electric actuator motor, a control shaft, and an entire robotic arm of linkage joints, increasing the friction points from 2 to 9 bearing spaces, all just to squeeze a marginal improvement in efficiency and power out of gasoline.
Right.
If this extreme, convoluted level of mechanical gymnastics is what it takes to improve the internal combustion engine today, does the catastrophic failure of the VC turbo prove that traditional gas engines have finally reached their evolutionary limit?
Oh, that's interesting.
Is this desperate, failing complexity the ultimate proof that the future of automotive reliability belongs to the elegant, mechanical simplicity of electric vehicles.
Wow. It makes you wonder. We came into this expecting an engine to just be an engine. But when you take a simple, reliable machine and try to force it to be a shape-shifting mechanical acrobat, you shouldn't be surprised when the joints snap, the oil runs dry, and the whole thing blows apart in your hands. Keep questioning what you're sold, and we'll see you next time.